Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you for joining us today with another release of our podcast series. Today's topic, we are going to be exploring how to unite and synergize diverse cultural backgrounds and the impact that has on creating authentic social change. And we have a wonderful colleague, friend, and expert in this arena with us today, Dr. Rich Klopp. He has over 2.5 years of experience in working in diverse cultural backgrounds with international organizations as a CEO of a number of different organizations in his career. He also is a doctorate from the IU School of Philanthropy and has lived in 5 different countries and was born in West Africa. And just very excited to have Rich with us today and begin to explore why do we care, what's the impact, and how do we create value by understanding diverse cultural backgrounds and the absolute importance that we as practitioners in the nonprofit sector have to take in understanding how we create diversity and unity in understanding cultural backgrounds from different countries and even within our own countries of different geographical regions and areas. So Rich, just really excited to have you with us. This is a topic, as you know, that I'm very passionate about and one that we often see, for whatever reason, not paid enough attention to in varying organizations and even sectors. So Rich, can you share with us, maybe as an opening topic, tell us about your experience, the impact that understanding true cultural diversity, however we explore that, has on creating meaningful social change that actually truly can transform the lives of people no matter what country we're in.
Yeah, hey, thanks for the opportunity. As you mentioned at the outset, I've had the good fortune and blessing of an international upbringing and then international work. So my parents were missionaries in Mali, West Africa. So whether I wanted it or not, my life was going to be international right from the start. And you know how it is as you get older, you look back and your perspective deepens. And I realize now what an incredible opportunity that was to be immersed in trying to understand cultural perspectives. So we're Americans living in the 6th region of Mali, a French-speaking country, local dialects, different cultures, even in the town we lived in. And then, as you mentioned, the rest of my career, so 2.5 decades, has been working with mostly American nonprofits, some Canadian, focused on doing things primarily in Africa. So bridging cross-cultural dimensions, meaning teams of people from different cultures, and trying to implement great programming in cultures that aren't our own either.
Right.
So it's been, let's just say I've learned a lot. It's been a wonderful journey.
What do you see as some of the biggest impacts that you've experienced in your career as you have really been a mediator of diverse cultural backgrounds in creating change?
Well, good question. I think what happens is, there's a book by an author named David Ellerman. He wrote a book called Helping Others Help Themselves.
Okay.
And I won't get this verbatim, but essentially he mentions at the very beginning of the book, and it had a big impact on me because I thought, that explains what I've experienced. I'm 56 years old, and what I've experienced across my lifespan and working with in international context, bridging different cultures. And he talks about how development is basically autonomous self-development. The whole, you give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Everybody knows that statement, but I think we don't think deeply enough about what autonomous self-development is, and that's what Ellerman's book was about, meaning that there's a subtle paradox or conundrum in the whole notion of trying to help other people.
Right.
As soon as we plan, and raise money to execute our plans, we've created a bit of a disconnect, a cultural disconnect, because we're working in your community. I mean, an example is, so I'm the CEO of Water for Good. We do boreholes. We put wells in people's community. So, a constant question we have to face is, do people want those wells really? And once that technology is in their community, how do we work with their understandings of how it's changed their lives and things like that? And I just think we don't think enough about that as we design projects. And a lot of the cross-cultural communication problems we end up with on teams come from those buried assumptions that we made at the very beginning.
Can you give us some examples of what that might look like? I mean, it's making me think not just from an international perspective, but then also how in a single country perspective as well, no matter what culture we're exploring, just on how we so often make assumptions about cultural backgrounds. How have you seen that play out?
Yeah. If I go to, like nonprofit management, for example, how does that play out when you're trying to manage a project and, picture a team of people from different cultural backgrounds. And of course, in this day and age, those people will be in different countries, right? A global team you're trying to manage either, grant funding or private funding to complete a project. And, I've used a metaphor often with teams, and it seems to get at it a little bit. And I don't know much about auto mechanics, but or exactly how a clutch works, but I've learned enough to know that I call it clutching essentially. In other words, if what you're trying to do is change the gear ratio, let's say in an African country, meaning the speed at which people adapt to new ideas, the ways in which culturally things are talked about or accepted or planned, let's say. And then, that's one side. Over here in the US side, we have a certain gear ratio as well. Usually, we're spinning a lot faster, let's say, than you're going to spin. The gears are going to spin in Central African Republic anyway. And so our job is to clutch between those. I find what often happens is we try to change the gears. We want their gears to run at our speed and vice versa. And I think a lot of frustration, that leads to a lot of frustration as compared to understanding of each other. There are reasons why cultures move at the speeds they do, have the dimensions of, communication, planning, their views of structure, their views of success of a project. It's all of that. We have to take the time to understand each other. And, think about a grant. What grant has time built in for us to do that, quite frankly? Right? You can imagine that in the proposal. But it's critical. And one other quick thought is I find, since I've been at this for a while, I find that the problem's accelerating. It used to be that when I was in Africa, you could knock off at 3 or 4 and then you spend time with your African colleagues, right, in their homes hanging out. But now, because we're connected, we're uploading reports and photos and, in the evening, right, back at the hotel or whatever.
Right.
So it's harder. And those expectations are there from donors. So it's harder to actually spend the kind of time required, I think, to build cultural connectivity, which then lowers, or let's just say it creates social capital that we can then spend out as we run into different cultural perspectives, which will naturally be there. We're not going to change each other. We're going to learn how to work together. It's
a really good perspective, and it makes me think about a term I've heard before called Western creep, and the idea that Western culture is permeating. And because it's what I hear you saying, the fact that now working in Africa, you have less relational time because we're now changing the gear set, to use your example, to a Western gear set from an African gear set. And you have less time to build the relational equity. That's a really good point. And I see this a lot, and I'm sure many others in our audience do as well, that we so often project onto others, the kind of the Western mindset. And I think about that from a donor perspective. And you and I have talked about this before, and you've seen this, and we see this a lot. The idea of mediating between a Western donor who has an interest in an international cause and the work that you're doing on the ground, say in Kenya or Nigeria or Central African Republic, and that when that donor has certain Western expectations, that if they are not well understood, those expectations look radically different and very unhealthy to an African culture who operates with a very different set of cultural dynamics, history, and meaning. And the idea that, if I think about your organization, Water for Good, and your role as CEO, I'm assuming a lot of time that you spend there is in mediating Western donor culture so that they can actually know how to be a partner through your organization, as opposed to project their own assumptions and their own biases onto the cultures around the world that Water for Good's working in. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And it feeds right into, conversations you and I have had, Jamie, over the years about just the relational core to philanthropy. And I don't think that changes across culture.
Right.
People care about certain things and they don't care about other things. They are moved to action, voluntarily to solve an issue. And that's something you can find in every culture. But that's very often not what organizations are there to take the time to do. We're there to manage projects and donors have expectations. And I don't, there's nothing wrong with those expectations. What we've tried to do at Water for Good or in other nonprofits I've led is allow for that time.
Right.
That might sound simple, but just personally, what I was just spent 6 weeks in the Central African Republic. So to get done everything I needed to get done would not have taken 6 weeks. I added extra time so that I could actually hang out with my African colleagues, at their homes, after work. It takes time, and I know I meet them. I stay in their homes if they're not in town. When I'm traveling, I meet their children. Again, I don't do enough of it, but what I've noticed over the years is, just like in any relationship, you're building a bank of social capital that I think in a low control context, which are often the context in which we're delivering development or relief, African contexts, for example. So low control, there's a lot that can go wrong and a lot that does go wrong. So you're going to need more social capital, right? We should spend more time connecting. And that makes sense. It's just hard to broker. So there's nothing like getting donors to go. One of our, maybe this is an example of what you're talking about is, almost every donor that wants to go to Africa, they want to go do something.
Right.
And we continuously tell them, our African colleagues don't want you to come do anything. What they really want you to come do is just come get to know them.
Wow.
Hang out with them, spend time with them. And that's really true. That's what they want. They're doing the work. They don't really need much help. And we can purchase local, activity, right? It's better for the economy to not have people come over. Nothing against group work and teams. I don't want to get in trouble for saying that, but you see what I mean? That's, I think, genuine and real. And I've seen real value get created because, a week later we have an issue to mitigate. And we remember, sharing a meal at that person's home, and the conversation is just different. If we had not broken bread together and fellowshipped and just enjoyed, the good relationships that are given to us.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because so I'm going to take this into a little bit of a tangent, but I believe, in pushback if I'm not making a good connection here, I believe it's connected. And that is, when you look at the 3 number one sources of group or team dysfunction, the research shows that the three biggest sources are groupthink, pluralistic ignorance, and diffusion of decision-making responsibility. And the number one way that you address and can combat or insulate a team from that is by creating social connectivity among the members of the team. And Rich, what I hear you saying is that that same concept applies not just at a team, but it applies culturally. And
I'm saying it's even more important, right? Because there's more to mitigate.
Absolutely. So if we were laying out kind of, Rich's roadmap to cultural unity and synergy, kind of putting my terms on it, I mean, it sounds like number one, you're saying know the context of the person and our own filter and our own assumptions that we may be making, to really do a gut check on ourselves. What assumptions am I projecting? And many times we have to dig to understand I'm bringing a filter that I'm not aware of. So understand the context, understand my own assumptions. But then number three, what I hear you saying is just be ready to invest in the person and invest in the relationship, and don't come to the table with a to-do list, but come to the table with a people list. Am I capturing that?
As usual, you better summarized what it took me a long time to say in a very succinct set of sentences. That's exactly it. Yeah, those two things combined. I don't actually think you can do a good job at the relational if you haven't examined your own assumptions. And you're right, it's hard to do. It's hard to take the time to do. We're invisible to them. But we can get at it if we think about it. And then we, again, water for goodness example, then we have to mitigate those assumptions that we have. And then we can be open about them. And that invites openness from our colleagues from other cultures about their own assumptions. And then we can figure out how to, as I say, clutch, not change one another, but create communications mechanisms, management mechanisms. And the simplest one, I know, again, it sounds ridiculous, but the simplest one I found over years is bargaining for more time to be together outside of work contexts, just normal life contexts, whether that's attending church together, going over to a person's actual home for dinner, spending the night in each other's venues, traveling together, talking about everything except what we work on. And it's I've seen that bring people across great cultural divides together and improve our working relationships and our effectiveness and efficiency of what we're there to do as well.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective, and I like your the analogy you use of clutching. And what I really enjoy about your context, Rich, and the message is that we're talking about how we unite individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds, but diversity and culture can be self-defined at a local level as well. And for the average organization who is clutching between board members who may bring a very different corporate lens to their role and in a very socially driven nonprofit organization, donors who may not understand the context of the urban environment and how the organization they're supporting is mediating those cultures and clutching inside that culture. Your roadmap applies on so many different dynamics, whether it's the donor, whether it's the board member, whether it's the team that's internal to the organization, the volunteers, how we serve both internationally or locally. And so your message is really timeless, Rich. So we definitely appreciate that. And Rich, just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And I hope everyone in our audience gets a chance to go to Water for Good and check out this amazing organization that Rich is leading. Rich, we so appreciate your friendship and your passion in this field, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. And all the best to your audience as well, and everybody at JDLA.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.